Okay, now we go on to part two of the race controversy of ancient Egypt. I was cut off right there in my pictures. I was going to do about four or five more and then go back to the article at the end and come back to some pictures, starting the second one, and then finish off the article from there. I guess we'll just do it with pictures from there. Here's a local man that's here, and you can see he's admixed quite a bit, and he does contain blue eyes. And so here's a blue-eyed man, an Egyptian, that's from the current people that are there, not from the ancient Egyptians. And you can see there's admix in those people too, which occasionally pops out. What can't really happen with the local people that are of this tone, though, is that their females are this color. And that shows you that one way, other than the genetics, that show that those people are not the ancient Egyptians, but recent migrants into the area that currently live there. So if we go on through other pictures, you can see these crystal blue eyes and these ancient Caucasian looking statues from the earliest dynasties. I believe this is a 5th dynasty one, and there's reserve heads that they have that don't have the crystal eyes, but they look just like this, and they look like Caucasian mannequin heads and do not look at all with any negroid features whatsoever. Blacks will never show this in any of their videos. They only try to show you dark admixed pictures and then a few conjectures, and then hop up and down and say that West Africans somehow were the Egyptians then. They've even shown this picture, but they won't show it with his blue eyes shining because that would give it away. They do like to mention that some black people, although it's extremely rare, 16 times more rare than albinism, I believe, that blacks will show up with a blue eye. But nay, that's not even the rarity of it. If I understand it correctly, they usually have more of a golden brown eye whenever they get this genetic defect in their eye that causes that. And the gold eye is much more common than the blue eye that you see. You might see pictures, even one coming up. I don't know, I'm just clicked on blue-eyed Egyptians and went. But you might see one coming up, but that's no way saying that the ancient Egyptians were somehow this negroid with genetic eye defects. That would be pathetic to try to show that as some type of proof, but it's in a lot of black people's videos, by the way. King Horror again, with his crystal blue eyes that follow you around the room. Statues made out of sycamore, and it used to be a lot paler than that, but just like trees, it darkens over time. Later, they're started to make out of yew trees, which are sacred to them, and all the Proto-Indo-Europeans up through the area said it goes back to elves and all kinds of neat things. And yew is even paler a little bit, but then it darkens to be quite dark, and then they find a statue that's wood that's dark and try to say that it's Negroes somehow and everything. It really gets disgusting. Let's continue looking at a few more pictures though, but here's another one of the wives, and so you can see how pale she is with her blue eyes. And you can see the first dynasties, with Nofret, which is what this looks like, is Nofret, and Renifer, and they have blue crystal eyes too. And so do the earliest of scribes, and I've put this in a recent video. And here is the Nakada culture themselves with these Caucasian effigies made out of gold with blue eyes and inset and real distinct eyebrows. And none of those features are negroid in any way, shape, or form, from the skinny mouth to the alkaline nose to the big round ears that poke out to the huge eyebrows to the blue eyes to the Caucasian head structure. And that's Nakada 2 period. If we look here, we can see a large array of these crystal eyes and these Caucasian Egyptians and the color of what they look like on their statues and so on. And not a single one of these ancients look negroid, and every picture here is from the 12th dynasty back, and he's the one from the 12th dynasty, and a lot of these are from 5th and 6th dynasties in the earliest periods that they have of Egypt, showing you who were the originators of Egypt itself, of course. Another picture of horror, another of that. Here's Mitri up close, and you can look into the eyes of an Egyptian, and you can see those inset rimmed eyes with a copper rim, quite often are lapis lazuli, the beautiful blue eyes that match, and this is a Caucasian. They also are there through Sumeria, but even the Mandan Sioux said they had blonde hair and blue eyes. And that's strange. And if you look at that Sumerian one, that inset rim around the eye, and everything is exactly the same, just not a crystal eye, just lapis lazuli. Like this. Like this. like on these, like in Peru, and even Buddha himself in India, Sumeria in Egypt, like all these. And I think if we just look at the symbol here of ancient Sumeria, and its crawled arms and its feathered wings, sun serpent, and then we have the same thing over here. You can see that there's a definite connection between these people and none between those people that are trying to claim it. And it gets worse than that. And you can see the rim on this eye and how this looks exactly like what we were just looking at. It's popped off of these, but look at this, and it's the exact same thing. It just doesn't have the crystal blue eye. It has the lapis lazuli. They talk about all their gods having lapis lazuli in their beards and all that type of stuff. And here we can see a lot more of it. From Nefertiti, and God, they threw a fit when Nefertiti came out, and they had a new recollection of her that was really Caucasian. Oh no, they even gave her a brownish eyes as opposed to that blue eye you see right there. And they made her darker than that. They made her darker than the statue actually shows. And they still didn't like it. Oh my God, they threw fits. It was amazing. Bearded, blue-eyed statues too, whenever the Amerindians didn't have beards, are blue eyes. So who are their gods, and who are some of their ancient controllers and people that ran their societies? Oh, it's kind of neat. You'll find people that try desperately to find some admix, and sure, there's some rare admix people that'll have this bluish gray eye. Does that mean that they were the ancient Egyptians? Not necessarily, but they may contain some genetics from people that were. Let's look at her. She looks extremely Egyptian, doesn't she? Yeah, you see the straight hair really helps it out and everything, and all the little extra stuff that she's got on, but this is a girl from Europe, and she's dressed up for a Halloween thing. And thank you very much. A little bit of eye makeup and pow. Yeah, she has full lips too and everything. Broad nose, blue eyes. Let's continue. Look at all these blonde and red-haired Egyptians. And they've tested them just like they talked about Ramses, who is right there, Caucasian like crazy, and their actual hair is blonde and red-haired through a lot of these. Hatshepsut, Amenhotep, Thuya and Yuya. Here's all those statues we were looking at. How about pre-dynastic? The first pre-dynastic mummy they have, and it's in the British Museum, is called Ginger, because he has blondish curly hairs, and they describe it being like the Greeks. It just gets real telling whenever you're looking through these, and you get to look at the eyes of an Egyptian, and you can tell, okay, so what were these people? You know, it's well noted that supposedly Volney recanted after getting to Egypt, that he talked crap getting there, and then once he got to look at everything, he recanted. So, yeah, quite a few interesting pictures here, and you find things like this, and there was a famous video that 7 Phoenician 7 did where they tried to dismiss this as some Hyksos lady, something blah blah blah, but this is Isis herself in the earliest of dynasties. And why would their goddesses be so pale? Why would they be so Cher and not so right? Yeah. And so here we're looking at Caucasian Egyptians. That's Caucasian. She's got a blue eye, thick eyebrows, alkaline nose and features, high cheekbones, full lips. Yeah. Sumerians too. Yeah, here show influx of Aryans and how they had come out. Mitochondrial DNA and genetics shows you that they blended into it, and stuff I've been trying to show people about the ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans that predate the Bible coming into the area, and ancient statues of all the guys and stuff. Yeah, definitely. And they carried with them signs like the swastika, and they carried with them the blue-eyed people that can be found in Turkey all the way back into Catalhoyuk times and stuff, with blue eyes, even over into the Americas and so on. And they try to disagree with it. And you see these guys that have this tan red ochre. Well, males have red ochre, females are on lighter through all of Greece, and you don't have a problem telling me who the Grecian people are, but look, they got blonde hair on them. Yep. Now he's got dark hair. Well, his kid is blonde head. Yeah, these are Caucasians. These are Caucasians that actually have blonde hair and blue eyes. Look at Tet straight on here, and you can see his Caucasian features. And of course, this is stylized, but in the same count. That's Caucasian. So let's go back to the other study here and finish that off. So we were talking about how the wheat, barley, goats, and possible cattle had all come from Anatolia and Sumerians, and where they had cultured cattle and brought the plow and all those type of things into a land that brought it farming itself to them, is what actually developed into Egypt and made it all happen. So definitely a huge contributor. And then of course the Hyksos that came later and brought the chariots and everything that let them continue their dynasties, for they were about to get run over by people that did have chariots and so on. It's kind of amazing the Hyksos didn't just roll them over and do whatever they wanted to do, but they just became kind of co-rulers and then got easily kicked back out off of it, leaving behind a legacy that helped Egypt ride for another 1,000 years. But then it started to collapse after the 25th dynasty, and it never really recaptured itself, and was always, after the Kushite influxation, was always kind of subjugant to other people and ruled by foreign leaders pretty much, and slowly fell apart. A study published in 2017 described the extraction and analysis of DNA from 151 mummified Egyptian individuals whose remains were recovered from Absu-er-Melek in the Cairo government. The area of Absu-er-Melek near El Fayoum was inhabited from at least 3250 BC to about 700 after AD. The scientists said that obtaining well-preserved, uncontaminated DNA from the mummies has been a problem for the field, and that these samples provided the first reliable data set from ancient Egyptians using high-throughput DNA sequencing methods. And so they found a way to discount, recent DNA from older DNA and run it through the machines and make sure that they had it. And even though they got a bunch of good hits, they only agreed upon these three were exacting and went with it. The study was able to measure the mitochondrial DNA of 90 individuals, and it showed that the mitochondrial DNA composition of Egyptian mummies has shown high level of affinity with the DNA of populations of the Near East. A shared drift and mixture analysis of the DNA of these ancient Egyptian mummies shows that the connection is strongest with ancient populations from the Levant, Near East, and Anatolia, and to lesser extent modern populations from the Near East and Levant. So, in other words, right there relating to the idea that the old people that used to live in the Levant aren't really there anymore. They've moved more north. In particular, the study finds that ancient Egyptians are more closely related to Neolithic and Bronze Age samples in the Levant, as well as Neolithic, Anatolian, and European populations. And whenever we look at this map, you can see where they spread and they peg it, where white would be nah, and then the yellower it gets to orange is yes, and red is hot. And so you can see where they tested from here, and these people genetically test to here, here, here over in Europe. This is what they test out to show. And look at all the yellow up over here, and over here near the Amazigh, and the people that have that blonde and blue haired traits and things that still exist there, and some of the ancient Carthaginian and Tunisian sites that are still extant that are there, and a decent amount through all of Europe in that orange. But look at the red peg. Bow, bow, bow. Yeah? That's where it shows up, people. So, genetics has a way of just going, here, have a cup of shut the Genome-wide data could only be successfully extracted from 3 of these individuals, as I told you. Of these 3, the Y chromosome haplogroups of 2 individuals could be assigned to the Middle Eastern haplogroup J and 1 to haplogroup E, 1B1B, which is common in North Africa, Caucasians. The absolute estimates of sub-Saharan ancestry in these 3 individuals range from 6 to 15%, which is odd. I think we have a 4% common that they say no matter what we all have, just like we're all akin to a banana in some way. And so it shows maybe about a 2% flux, but I'm not sure if they figured that in getting the 6 or the other numbers. And they tell you that's significantly lower than the level of sub-Saharan DNA ancestry in the modern Egyptians from Abu Sir, range from 14 to 21%, which is even less than the American Negroids. They average around 20-22%, I believe, on Caucasian admixing to them themselves now, which they all try to blame on slave masters and stuff. But because it's so constant and across the board, you kind of shows you that they had been mulattoed and then changed into it from there and bred back to themselves. But that's probably for a total another video. But strangely, it shows that they had a much significantly lower genetic connection to any sub-Saharans until much more modern times, and it still comes out to be a small percentage even with them, but it shows reflection in it, and then people seeing those people thought there might be some type of influx, which gave them a false sense. The study's author cautioned that the mummies may be unrepresentative of the ancient Egyptian population as a whole, though, considering how deep it goes up to the Nile, since they were recovered from a northern part of Egypt. But the two lands that came together there wasn't a Negroid and a white land in any way, shape, or form. It was Caucasians and Caucasians. So the point of that is rendered fairly mute, but they won't moot in any way, shape, or form. The data suggest a high level of genetic interaction with Near East since ancient times. So in other words, these people that became endemic to the area were still having Near Eastern influx since ancient times. Probably going back to prehistoric Egypt, they say. Our data seems to indicate close admixture and affinity of a much earlier date, which is unsurprising given the long and complex connections between Egypt and the Middle East. These connections date back to prehistory and occurred at a variety of scales, including overland and maritime commerce, diplomacy, immigration, invasion, and deportation. And so now we can see that they do agree upon perhaps the Sumerians coming on around on a boat in ancient times, but they don't go into any depth on that concept any deeper than that. But where else would somebody come from a boat? Or maybe they came like the Phoenicians? Well, the Phoenicians call themselves Canaan, so they were there the whole time. Specific current day controversies. Today, the issues regarding the race of the ancient Egyptians are troubled waters, which most people who write about ancient Egypt from within the mainstream of scholarship avoid. The debate, therefore, takes place mainly in the public sphere and tends to focus on a small number of specific issues. So let's look at a few of them then. Tutankhamun. Several Afrocentric scholars, including Diop, have claimed that Tutankhamun was black, and have protested that attempted reconstructions of Tutankhamun's facial structures, as depicted on the cover of National Geographic magazine, have represented the king as too white. Among these writers was Chancellor Williams, who argued that King Tutankhamun, his parents and grandparents, were black. Funny, when we delve into their lineages, they're all Caucasian as hell, and there is no blacks in ancient Egypt, but they want to interject all black somewhere in there, but fail on every attempt. Although modern technology can reconstruct Tutankhamun's facial structure with a high degree of accuracy, based on CT data from his mummy itself, determining his skin tone and eye color is impossible, but through genetics you can do that, and that's done after this article apparently. The clay model was therefore given a coloring which, according to the artist, was based on an average shade of modern Egyptians. So it could have actually been a much lighter shade. They have to concede. Oh, it could have been darker too, but it still would have been a Caucasian with a tan getting darker and darker, and would have never been a Negroid. And that's the problem that people had with that, along with Nefertiti, whenever it shows her with a blue eye and Caucasian and light skin, that I'm darker than right now, that well, she's black, how deluded can you be? But then whenever the recreation comes out, they throw this big fit, and they wanted her just to be darker, and that one video I did about the girls on the reel trying to say because she was in Africa she had to be Negroid. And of course it was the black lady wearing the hair hat, mimicking an Egyptian on that day, looking nowhere near like any Egyptian on any wall, was trying to say that. Let's continue. Terry Garcia, National Geographic's Executive Vice President for Mission Program, said in response to some of those protesting against the Tutankhamun reconstruction, the big variable in skin tone North Africans we know today had a range of skin tones from light to dark. In this case, we selected a medium skin tone, and we say quite up front, this is mid-range. We never know for sure what his exact skin tone was or color of his eyes with 100% certainty. Maybe in the future people will come to a different conclusion. But right now at this point, he's a Caucasian person, had flight 10 from living around the Mediterranean. When pressed on the issue by American activists in September 2007, Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Dr. Zahi stated Tutankhamun was not black. He also went on to state that any belief in Egypt as being a black civilization had no truth in it. In November 2007, in Ancient Egypt magazine, Hawass asserted that none of the facial reconstructions resembled Tut, and that in his opinion the most accurate representation to the boy king is the mask from his tomb. But he said that knowing very full well every single one of those masks are done in a stylized form and not something would represent a true facial form. He himself describes this in a lot of other times, showing you that he did not want to let know. He also didn't want to let the DNA get out after he tried to get it tested, and whenever it showed it in the TV screen, but he didn't come out with the numbers on it, people that are using that exact same program and equipment were able to put in the numbers that are easily seen on the screen and hit it, and it came out to being Caucasian, European, early farmers through now haplogroup and everything, and well, R1B1A was it or something, and really kind of destroyed the idea. The Discovery Channel commissioned a facial reconstruction of Tutankhamun based on CT scans of a model of his skull based in 2002. Now, in 2001, the genomics company IGEA launched a Tutankhamun DNA project based on genetic markers that it indicated had pulled from a Discovery Channel special on the pharaoh. According to the firm, the microsatellite data suggested that Tutankhamun belonged to the haplogroup R1B1A2. Yeah, there, okay. The most common paternal clade among males in Western Europe now. It also showed to be the same one as Tsar Nicholas of Russia and a few other important people in the past. But Karsten Falk and Albert Zink, who led the unit that had extracted Tutankhamun's DNA, chided IGEA for not liaising with them before establishing the project. After examining the footage, they also concluded that the methodology the company used was unscientific. Yeah, they didn't run the genetics themselves. They just stole your genetic data that you showed on TV and run it through their same simple machine, and now you want to discredit it. If you do, you're discrediting your machine's capability to decipher it. Yeah, that's the reason that doesn't get touted anymore, you see. See how that works? Cleopatra, if we have to be. The race and skin of the color of Cleopatra, the last active Hellenistic ruler of the Macedonian Greek Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, established in 320 BC, was also caused for some debate among Negrocentrics who were really gripping towards trying to be related to some people that they didn't even know existed. For example, the article Was Cleopatra Black? Was published in Ebony magazine from 2012, trying to delude Negroes into making up their own racism and lies and then acting upon it and getting real mad, and then if they ever get debunked, now you can get mad about the lie you made up. And an article about Afrocentrism from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch mentions the question too. Scholars generally identify Cleopatra as essentially a Greek ancestry with some Persian and Syrian ancestry, which Persian and Syrians are all Aryans also. In fact, the Persians called themselves Aryans at a few points, and the Greeks called them self that, and said that the Medes were also called Aryans before Medes had gone to them, and they changed their name. And many of the people in the area had done so. So she had her Macedonian Greek family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, and intermingled with Seleucid aristocracy of the time, notably including the first Cleopatra, Queen Cleopatra I of Syria, wife of Ptolemy V of Egypt. And that's Caucasians on Caucasians and close relations. And royalty on royalty. Right? While her mother's identity is uncertain, she is generally believed to be Cleopatra V of Egypt, the sister of cousin wife of Ptolemy the 12th, Auletes, who was the daughter of Ptolemy IX of Ptolemy X. Additionally, while her identity to her paternal grandmother isn't certain, she certainly is believed to be Cleopatra the Fourth via Ptolemy's the Ninth, Ptolemy the Ninth of Lathros, or a Greek Alexandrian woman. God, I just hacked that up to shit. Pardon me. Claims of illegitimacy were used against Cleopatra in the extremely hostile propaganda campaign by Augustus Michael Grant, noting that if Cleopatra had been illegitimate or a Negroid in any way, her numerous Roman enemies would have revealed this to the world. Grant also proposes that Cleopatra's paternal grandmother may have been mixed with Syrian and Greek in line with the president of the Persian and Syrian blood in the Ptolemaic line, and continues that certainly she was not an Egyptian by birth or whatever through that, but then again, pretty much the same, aren't they? Noting that there's only one known Egyptian mistress of Ptolemy from the 3rd BC and no known Egyptian wife of a Ptolemaic king. He goes on to say that Cleopatra probably had not a drop of Egyptian blood, and that she would have described herself as being Greek. Diana Preston also writes that Cleopatra's paternal grandmother may have been part Syrian, continuing that if Cleopatra had an Egyptian grandmother, it does not follow that she was a black African. And that Cleopatra almost certainly had olive skin and dark eyes, although some recant that they were green. Adrian Goldsworthy notes Cleopatra having Macedonian blood with little Syrian, was probably not dark-skinned, and he also notes Roman propaganda never mentions it, so it wouldn't probably be there. If she had swarthy skin, they would have called her that swarthy skin thing. See, back then, and of course in the other deal it says that, oh, the Romans and the Greeks, they didn't have any problem with skin. Now they did to a point, and somebody was swarthy, they would even note it, especially if it used in their favor. But if somebody was to be a Negroid, it's not even a question, people. I mean, how disgusting can you be? Oh, same. It's not the same. A tan Caucasian is not the same as a Negroid. Contending fairer skin is marginally more likely considered her ancestry, in that she was no more Egyptian culture ethnically than most of the residents of modern-day Arizona are Apaches, or that the modern-day residents inside of Egypt are related to the elder ones. He further notes that Cleopatra's native tongue was Greek, that it was in Greek literature and culture that she was educated. Her worship of Isis was strongly Hellenized, and though she was presented in some statuary in the ideal Egyptian style, she was unlikely to have dressed like this outside of performing certain rites. Instead, he continues, Cleopatra wore the headband and robes of a Greek monarch. Stacey Schiff concurs Cleopatra was not dark-skinned, and that the Ptolemies were in fact Macedonian Greek, which makes Cleopatra approximately as Egyptian as Elizabeth Taylor. But now we can tell you that Elizabeth Taylor is probably that haplogroup that makes her more of an Egyptian than any black person in history. Let's continue. That her Ptolemaic relatives were described as honey-skinned, and that she was Persian, and that an Egyptian mistress is a rarity among the Ptolemies. Mary Lefkowitz notes that had Cleopatra's grandmother or mother been Egyptian, it surely would have been pointed out in the records that concludes that whatever her ancestry, Cleopatra regarded herself as Greek, and she's a Caucasian. And I'm not going to read through this all right here, and all that is about her and her DNA test and all these type of things that went on. There's a couple of neat mentions in there that shows you some other connections into it, but one thing it does not show is any Negroid connections whatsoever. The Great Sphinx of Giza. The model for the Sphinx of the Great Sphinx of Giza is unknown. Sorry about that. Virtually all Egyptologists and scholars currently believe that the race of the Sphinx represents the likeness of the pharaoh Khafre, although in a few Egyptologists, interested amateurs have proposed several different hypotheses. If you look at Khafre here, he's definitely a Caucasian here, but then black people want to try to claim him, because if they can claim him, then they can claim the Sphinx, and if they can claim the Sphinx, then they think that Egypt's all black and that West Africans weren't West Africans. Although a few Egyptologists are interested and propose several different hypotheses, numerous Afrocentric scholars such as Du Bois, Diop, and Asante have characterized the face of the Sphinx as black or negroid. Another early depiction of a negroid Sphinx is recorded on the travel notes of a French scholar who visited Egypt between 1783 and 1785. Volney. Oh, they love that recantation of this one French guy. Along with the French novelist Gustave Flaubert. American geologist Robert Schoch has written that the Sphinx has distinctive African, Nubian, or Negroid aspect, which is lacking in the face of Khafre. And there's a lot of people nowadays, due to awe and trying to be real politically correct, that will say things along those lines. But again, if the statue had to be prognostically built to hold and cantilever the whole entire weight of the head onto it, it would have been somewhat prognostic. He also used to contain quite a chin beard onto him, and again, we're clearly noted that Negroids without admix don't really grow any body or facial hair. It's well noted. In fact, they like to use it whenever they get mad when they find they've been debunked and call us hairy cave apes and all these type of things. Not decent eyebrows either is seen on all the Egyptian art. Not the blue eyes, not the Caucasian pale ladies and red ochre skin. It's a symbolic thing that goes all the way back to Cro-Magnon times. Kemet, they like to try to use that. They play this funny little game where if they know a name that you don't, they all of a sudden do become the Egyptians. And so the Egyptian is really a name given to it of Egyptus, being a connection to the Greeks and ancient brothers, by the way. And so it does show a Greek connection and an idea of, I went the high road, you went the low road, and da-da-da, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. But in that fact, the ancient place used to be referred to as Kemet, and it was the Black Land. And really not all of Egypt was called that, but the fertile zones where they grew crops, because the Nile would burp out its black soil. And so they referred to it as being that land. They didn't actually refer to themselves at that point as being some specialized people. They were the people of the two lands. Ancient Egyptians referred to the homeland as Kemet, conventionally pronounced Kemet. According to Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, the Egyptians referred to themselves as black people or Kemet. That's not true, because whenever it has this marker onto it, see if it'll blow that up. It won't blow that up. When it shows this marker onto it, it's a place. When it shows this marker, it's onto it, it's a people. Whenever they write Egyptians, it looks like this, and this is people of the land. Whenever it writes it like this is of the land. And so it's totally different than each other. People have pointed this out long, long before, and then they go, look, there's a black statue, and they go, yes, they have fertility statues signifying the black land. It says it right here on the wall if you know how to read ancient Caucasian Egyptian languages. And then they get mad and call you a snow cave ape again. Kim was the etymological root of other words such as Cam or Ham, he proposes, which refers to black people in Hebrew tradition. And no, it doesn't, because there are no black people in the Bible whatsoever. Ham didn't get cursed, it was Canaan, and we know Canaanites are white, so we're going to leave that alone. The idea Canaan was cursed and that the Hebrews were supposed to take over is a late etymology, saying that they were going to come in and not some god was going to do something special, but they were literally going to kill off the people and take their land. These were the ancient merchants of old, Phoenicians, who called themselves Canaan. And they weren't Negroid. In fact, there are a lot of red hairs in that group and so on too, and it definitely shows you that. And I've done a video recently on some of the Phoenicians' works and even their genetics. So, the biblical name Ham bears no relationship at all to the notion of blackness, and of now as an unknown etymology, although people do believe that Ham actually means sunburnt. So very much like Ethiopian and stuff, and so Caucasians that are sunburnt. Blacks profess they can't be sunburnt, and without admix, they're not even light enough to do so. And so blacks with admix now want to try to claim, oh, the Egyptians were admixed, or something crazy, and it really has no bearing at all on truth or fact at all. In fact, it shows you their racism and hate towards white people and the lack of what they've actually done themselves. William Lee Hansberry about Odyssey Musa Lam have argued that Kemet was derived from the skin color of the Nile Valley people, which Diop claimed was black. And Diop's claims have all been debunked, and it didn't have anything to do with the skin of the Nile Valley people because they were lighter Caucasians who got suntanned and at worst would get up into the point of that red ochre color that we're talking about, as I can do myself. See, and I'm Irish. The claim that the ancient Egyptians had black skin has become a cornerstone of Afrocentric historiography, and it's the thing that's the most easily debunked. For on the wall is the Negroid Nubians, and then you have the light, pale Caucasian women, and the men drawing darker symbolically, exactly like Greek and other art around there, Minoans, Etruscan, Mitanni, everybody around that area, showing you their common connection and no connection to a Negroid whatsoever. Mainstream scholars hold that Kemet are the black land or the black place, and that's what the X signifies, and that this reference to a fertile black soil that was washed down by Central Africa by the annual Nile inundation. A contrast to the barren desert outside the narrow confines of the Nile watercourse was called Desheret, which we call desert now. That's where that word comes from, or the Red Land. Raymond Faulkner's concise dictionary of Middle Egyptian translates Kemet into Egyptians. Gardner translates it as Black Land, Egypt. At UNESCO Symposium in 1974, Sonoran, Obinga, and Diop concluded that Kemet means black. Okay, and however, Sonoran clarified that the adjective Kemet means people of the black land rather than black people, and that the Egyptians never used the adjective Kemet to refer to the various black peoples they knew of. They only used it to refer to themselves, and they called the Negroids Nubians and Nahesu. And Nahesu, ironically, comes out now in a modern linguistics and Coptic, I believe, to be worthless. So they actually got them to name themselves worthless. Ancient Egyptian art. Ancient Egyptian tombs and temples contain thousands of paintings, sculptures, and works which reveal a great deal about the people of that time. However, their depictions of themselves and their surviving art and articles are rendered in sometimes symbolic rather than realistic pigments. As a result, the ancient Egyptian artifacts provide somewhat conflicting and inconclusive evidence of the ethnicity of the people who lived in Egypt during dynastic times. In other words, if you freak out on red ochre, you've lost your mind, because the Greeks did it, all the people of North Africa did it, all the people around the entire Mediterranean did it, Greeks, Mitanni, all kinds of people did it, where a male was drawn symbolically red and a female was drawn extremely pale. And the problem that Negroids have is the female gets extremely pale whenever a female Negroid is going to be the exact same color, and you couldn't get her to get any lighter whatsoever. And that really ends that debate totally, but we're going to continue. In 1839, Champollion states in his work Egyptian that the Egyptians and Nubians were represented in the same manner in tomb paintings and reliefs. But that's a lie, because the